Justin Martyr did testify that Jesus was born in a cave, which was commonly used as a stable.
They're still stuck in that literalism trap as though it's a historical story. And what we're showing you is it's actually the story of the stars.
But when we look at asterisms in the constellation of Cancer, you've got a stable, you've got a donkey. That's actually what you're seeing in the sky, what's happening at midnight on the winter solstice, making it clear that the Virgin Mary is exactly described in the same words as Venus.
Miriam, right? Waters, Maria, seas, Virgo, Marina.
The book of Revelation is not even the same canonical work as the rest of the New Testament. One guy basically invented it.
Instead of leaving things blank where the fragments didn't talk about them, he tried to fill them in and make them up himself.
The birth chart of this podcast, Inner World. The sole mission of the show is to heal through hidden knowledge being brought from the hidden into the open. This chart is like God is on our side to do this work. This is not a random thing. Welcome back to the Inner World podcast, y'all. It is time to wrap it up with our 14 episode coverage of Reverend Robert Taylor's Astronomico-Theological Lectures. That is a serious mouthful of a title, but basically encapsulates the entire Old Testament with some New Testament stuff thrown in terms of the astrology that is encoded in there. And remember, Reverend Robert Taylor went to jail for this and was persecuted for the majority of his career after he decided to come out against the dogma that he saw as corrupt. So today we have a bit more to cover off in regards to Miriam, the Virgin Mary in the Old Testament. We're going to talk about the Aegian stables allegory and the 12 gates of New Jerusalem and how they correspond to birthstones and the stones of the Zodiac. We have a good one today. This is going to be awesome. Dylan is leading the charge, ready for combat. Looks like he's about to hop into a fighter jet. Let's do it.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll get right into it because this is one of those episodes where every time I go through the notes, I keep adding to it. It's just hard not to. So the gravy portal opens wide with this one. And we're going to finish off with Miriam and Mary and all this stuff. But where we're getting the foundation of New Jerusalem, it's important because this idea of a foundation will tie right into the astro-theological situation of reckoning the year. And no matter what time of year you do decide to reckon the year, that will be basically your foundation or your chief quote unquote cornerstone. And particularly with some of the subjects we broached last episode, we're going to get into Gaza and the root of that and terms that mean strong and stone and foundation of the church and chief cornerstone, etc. So there is a sign of the Zodiac and a month of the year that serve as those foundations, especially in this system. And different cultures have these reckoning at the solstices, and then some of them have them reckoning at the equinoxes, right? So you can think of like the calendar of Romulus or the Irish calendar, Rosh Hashanah. Those are equinoctial reckonings or foundations. But we're going to kick it right off. You want to read the first paragraph that Taylor wrote?
I'll just even bring a little link back to the Baal topic that is still unfinished. We probably have another.
Oh, we're going to get through that we're going to have like way more episodes.
Yeah, that's the thing, dude. But it all connects back to the Baal system. And so understand that words like strong and stone both relate to the ideal of BLTR type words. So the strong stone, right? The chief cornerstone. This is still Baal tangential for sure. So Taylor wrote, the Gospel of St. Luke, cautious of letting in too strong a light on the astronomical allegory, has not told us directly who the mother of the Virgin Mary was, but has only mentioned Anna, the prophetess, the daughter of Phanuel, that is of the tribe of Aser. When the words are translated into their meaning, the year, the daughter of our shining god in the constellation of Virgo. That is basically the literal meaning of Anna, the daughter of Phanuel of the tribe of Acer, being the mother of the Virgin Mary. So we want to take it from there? Oh wait, there's still more Taylor here.
There's still more, but it was a great natural pause because I'm not sure if he wrote Acer or Isar, but it might have been Asher. But if you look at how that is spelled in Hebrew, it's A-S, I think U-R. And it goes back to that Aesir and Isar, Etruscan and Scandinavian and Irish words for God.
Exactly. And he continues, he says, the 26th of July, our St. Anne's Day, being the beginning or standing upon the first degree of that sign, when that point was the point of the vernal equinox, which, upon the calculation of the motion of precession, on principles recognized by all astronomers at 71 years, 8 or 9 months for a degree, and consequently 2,160 years for a whole sign, gives us 13,060 years when St. Anne's Day was the first of the Egyptian year. Anytime in the infinite ages before which time, but demonstrably before which time, this allegorical almanac must have been in being. And thus, while we are not able to say exactly how old the gospel is, we are able to assign a time than which it is demonstrated to be much older. It is older than 13,060 years ago. That is more than 11,230 years older than the period assigned to Christianity, and more than 5,393 years older than the period which has been dreamed of as that of the creation of the world itself. Man, that's heavy duty. So Taylor is basically talking about the precession of the equinoxes, the slow drift, approximately 72 years for 1 degree, that changes the point at which the vernal equinox happens, and all the signs are shifting over slightly. And he's saying that the 26th of July being St. Anne's Day, as a beginning point of the year, he's trying to make a case for how long ago that must have been for it to be the beginning of the year as the vernal equinox. Am I right about that?
Yes, and I was actually going to ask you, what do you think about all of this? Because you can see what I think about all of it, but I don't want to necessarily poison the well. And for the audience's benefit, we don't have to read that next paragraph, but I think all of this is based on calculations, and I don't think any of this is a product of the ancient world. I think it's a product of kind of like those Renaissance guys, after the 10th century, where they started getting really precise instruments. And then they started learning about all these things and being able to compare the precession and noticing that it's changing, then going, oh, well, if it changes this 71.667 whatever degrees 1 degree every 61.667 years or 8 or 9 months, then this is what it would have been 10,000 years ago. And I think that's what you see in the Brahmic system as well as the European system and all that. What do you think about that? Do you think there was actually a history of this and the priestcraft reflects the period of the procession, or no?
I lean towards no. I'm with you on that because judicial astrology goes both ways, right? It's not just about predicting the future. It's about reading the past or inventing the past in a way that creates a sort of plausible narrative, right? So I think that probably the way that they constructed a lot of this mythology is kind of like when you're on the internet and you're writing a blog post and you wrote the blog post today, but you backdated it so it looks like it came from 5 years ago. This is like a backdating system in a way. I think that could very well be the case. Right, there's so much evidence that the entire Pentateuch, all the books of Moses were not actually contemporary to the time period that it is assumed to be contemporary to, which would have been, processionally speaking, this age of Taurus, right? Going into the age of Aries. But it could be that they just wrote the story this way, based on astrotheology that they would associate with that time. And then, right, that's their way of saying when it came from, but they're just writing mythology and calling it history. And maybe in their opinion, maybe in the opinion of the priests that created those myths, they think it's true enough, right? Like it's something like that must be true because they do have procession as something that seems to be observed by their order, right? I think that it's like a version of the truth in their mind. It's my truth.
I love that I can count on you to always like remind, because I wasn't going to go there because it just, to me, it's already kind of settled. But I love that you keep harping back on this idea of the contemporary nature of some of these things, because we're going to look at Nazareth next. And that word, it only appears in the New Testament. And even when you look at like the etymology, they concede that it's unknown. And I don't think it's something, I think it's a mystical term, and we'll get into that. But do you want to read the next paragraph, or shall I take over for a little bit and give you a break?
I'll go. While our Christian chronologers, Taylor writes, have fixed the birth of Christ in the stable of Nazareth at the very day, nay, to the minute, to the accuracy of the setting of a chronometer, to that minute of midnight between Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, when, for the same reason, the ancient Egyptians fixed the birth of their god Osiris, the Persians that of their god Mithra, the Greeks that of Bacchus, that is, when the sun, having passed his lowest point of declination, at the winter solstice, enters the first degree of Capricorn, the goat, where exactly in the visible heavens is the stable of Aegius, in which he is said to be born, at the moment when the middle of the Virgin was on the eastern border of the horizon, which constellation was therefore said to be his mother.
Do you want to do you have the ability to pull these like graphics up just so people can see what we're talking about with the Solar
do you want
King?
To see the birth chart graphic here?
We'll show the Solar King because it's a nice visual aid when people, the very next right beneath that, because Aegius.
Yeah, and I think we should just try to make a point of recapitulating what Taylor wrote when we read a big section so that it's not just like tough for people, right? Because he's essentially talking about this constellation, the Aegean constellation. Some interpretations suggest that ancient Greeks referred to an area of the sky typically identified with the constellation Capricorn as the Aegean stable. This is where the sun was considered to be stabled or at its lowest, most dormant state during the winter solstice in the northern hemisphere. And I think that, that tracks, that could be the case. I also think when we're talking about the time of year Capricorn, which is beginning at the winter solstice, that if the sun is in Capricorn, you're not really seeing Capricorn or that area of the sky at night, right? So
bring up Jesus' birth chart.
Pull that up.
Yeah, so they can see where you're saying, like, that's below the horizon. That's what it looks like at night. So you see the summer constellations at night.
That's right.
The opposite
So right
sides.
at the top of the sky is going to be Cancer. And Cancer is the crab, sure. But when we look at asterisms in the constellation of Cancer, you've got a stable, you've got a donkey, there's all manner of things in there in terms of the names of the specific stars of that constellation. So that's actually what you're seeing in the sky, telling the story of what's happening at midnight on the winter solstice. You're actually seeing that.
It's actually the end of the winter solstice, because that's when they know the very next day that sun is going to have risen 1 degree of declination, making its way back to the equinox and then summer solstice. And this is an argument that I see online, or I used to see online. I haven't watched people make content on this stuff in probably over half a decade regularly, close to like 7 years, something like that. But one of the arguments I used to see is that,
is it because it's garbage? It's like other content on this stuff is garbage.
No, it's just I used to pay attention to stuff a lot more. And once you do the work yourself, you don't really need to watch other people. Like once you get to a certain level of knowledge, you can look at it and read it yourself and see it for yourself. But like one of the arguments back in the day used to be like all of this astrotheology stuff, and that's all paganism. And Jesus was actually born probably sometime around September 11th or something like that, And they always used to like make it seem like because there's details of like shepherds or whatever taking things out to pasture, something like that at the time of year, that there's no way that he could have been born. But they're still stuck in that literalism trap as though it's a historical story. And what we're showing you is it's actually the story of the stars. And that's what I wanted to just make sure people understand before we get that in the comments. But this is it. This is the foundation of the church. This next slide you have, and I did my best to kind of show people. I had to invert the sign of the Zodiac, the graphic that I used, but you can see Lord of the Ascendant is Mary or Virgo, right at the time of midnight, where the sun would be entering Capricorn. And by dawn, if you want to go to the very next one, you'll see that now Virgo is at the midheaven. She's like basically the Lord of the sky, right? At dawn, in the pre-dawn sky. And what is that? That is her side now. If you look at her, Jesus is being born from the side, or the Caesarean. So you have this pattern, whether it's Brahma, Buddha, whatever, Bacchic, Augustus, all of these people, whether they were historical and then built their history off of mythology, or whether they were always fictional fables, that's what the being born of the side of the woman or the side of their mother represents. And hopefully I did a decent enough graphic where, those who have access to the show notes can, blow it up, download it, share it however they want. Now, to resurrect means to bring back to life, consciousness, or use, and it's derived from resurgere, to rise again. That's Latin. It is used to describe raising the dead, reviving old habits or projects, and in religious contexts, the restoration of life. Synonyms include revive, renew, restore, and resuscitate. Now, if you look at what that means in relation to astrotheology or astronomy, the sun dies and resurrects, or lowers in declination and rises in declination every year, which marks the end and the beginning. So when you measure the sun's declination at noon every day, you're making a angular measurement using some sort of protractor device. Now we use a sextant, right? I'm not sure what they used thousands of years ago, but it was probably something of a similar nature, maybe not as advanced. And you're getting an angle to the sun. And by knowing that angle, you know where you are in the sun throughout the year, and you can use it to chart yourself with navigation and cartography and all that stuff, and learning where you are in relationship to the world. So you have these ideas like Jesus saying, I am the beginning and the end, the Alpha and the Omega. And you will notice that he is the same as all of these sun gods, whether it's Israel, whether it's Kronos. These are archetypes of time. Kronos, the lowercase k, it just means time, right? Jova, Bacchus, Heracles, Mitra, Osiris, all the rest. And so where I wanted to go is with this word we use, Nazareth. In the middle of it is what we talked about last episode, Aza.
Let's hold up.
Yeah, go for it.
That's big. I just want to stop you on the resurrect thing, from the Latin word to rise again. What is the name of the pattern that the sun makes in the sky when it's doing that annual resurrection? It's called the Analemma, right? And the Analemma, that word comes from Greek, from ana, which is up, and lambanin, to take. So it's like basically to take up, or to it's basically like to prop up or to rise up. It's that same idea of there's a connection in terms of meaning between the Latin word for resurrect and the word analemma.
And Anna is the feminine form of anus, which is year.
There you go.
So encoded in that Nazareth is the word goat or strong, which, that's what all foundations have to be, from which we only have the Greek version regarding any credibility. So sometimes I've heard people say it means flower in Hebrew. That's not something that you could definitively prove because you have no Hebrew version of the New Testament that it's claimed to be copied from. Nazareth doesn't exist in the Old Testament. It doesn't exist in the Talmud, and it doesn't even exist in the writings of Josephus. The copies of his work that we have are from the Greek minuscules in the 9th, 10th, or 11th centuries, something like that. So I wanted to put that out there because a lot of times we presume there is this clear-cut meaning and etymology of these words when in fact there's nothing. And I think when we look at it, you can pull it apart. So when you look at Nazareth, how it's written in Greek, if you want to pull up 2 photos from where I am is the Greek lexical summary. If you could pull that up just so people can see that I'm not bullshitting them, you can see what Nazareth, the forms it takes in Greek. These are not typical Greek terminations of words. And when I see things like that are odd in Greek, I think, okay, maybe we've talked about how the New Testament is likely written in Latin or copied from the ideas of Latin monks who are then writing in Greek to try to disguise the origins of the system. So I look at it from a Latin/Celtic perspective on account of the relationship between Latin, Celtic, and Sanskrit all coming from the same parent, which is Etruscan. And we've done a lot of work on that, so I'm not going to retrograde, I guess, and back into that topic. But if you look at the termination of Nazareth, it literally is philologically rot, like ROTH in Celtic or Irish or, any of those older languages, which is wheel. In Latin, it would take the form of rota. In the Vulgate, it's written Nazarenus, which philologically, if you just look at what the letter N signifies, you have nun, which literally in Hebrew means progeny and fish, which could be either the sun or SON, or the fish, which is the ichthys or the symbolism used by Christianity. How many times have you seen that fish symbol with Jesus written inside of it? Az, which is goat. Anus, which is year. So you have Nazaranus. And if the fish is not used for the symbol, these are questions that I posited to the reader. Now, if you look at the sign of Capricorn, it's the image right above, you'll see that it is a sea goat. It's a half goat, half aquatic fish-like creature. And so you see Jesus is born in the manger of a goat. That's when the sun rises 1 degree of declination on the 25th, that morning. So when it hits midnight on the 25th, that's when they reckon the beginning of the new year in this system. And that's important because you also see Oannes, which is basically Ioannis or Janus, or Januarius. Well, in the Orient, so-called Babylonian system, you have Dagon, which is dag is fish in those languages, and on is the sun, but it translates literally as the being. So you have literally sunfish or fish god, and then you have all these representations of these symbols in the Catholic system, the universal system, whereas the Pope wears a mitre, which is like a fish head. The bishops called themselves pisciculi, which means the little fishes. They move in a school together, just like fishes. And that's the root of the word bishop and episcopal. So do you have anything to say about that?
I'm just into the Nazareth breakdown. Nun, or the letter N, fish, Aza, goat, rot, or rot, the wheel. Wow. It's the fish goat on the wheel.
And I'm not saying that is the etymology of it. I'm just offering this because there is admitted uncertainty in the etymological origin. And if we're dealing with priestcraft, you know how they like to play these games.
Well, I'll offer an easier one. We have seen before, I'm blanking on a particular example, but we have occasionally seen letters swapping between M and N before, and just change the Nazareth to an M at the beginning, and it's Mazaroth. That's the closest word I can come up with out of Old Testament Hebrew to Nazareth, Mazaroth, which is the Zodiac.
Matzah, M-A-Z-Z-A, means reaping, harvest, and rota, wheel, Matzarota. And you know,
everybody, we fixed your uncertain etymology. You're welcome.
I don't want to claim that, but
yeah, right. I'm kidding.
I think that's probably where I was going with this, because that's what it looks like to me as well. I just didn't want to make it so obvious. But if you could pull, we didn't do this last episode, so let's pull up that next Aza, so everyone can see how Gaza is written. There's nobody who can read Hebrew that will look at this and say there's a Gimel in it. It is literally O-Z-E. Ayin, Zion, Hey. O-Z-E, because you have to remember that the ayin comes from Phoenician, which represents an O, which begets the Greek omicron, which is an O. It's not a A, but we just transliterate it as A, as Aza, whatever. But that's how Gaza is written. And we've covered that. The very father of ecclesiastical history cited Porphyry, as Chance said in the last episode. And that Israel was a Phoenician word for Kronos, who rules Capricorn. And Chance laid all this out, so we're just repeating this, but because we're touching on this subject, this strong Oz sign, this stable, this foundation of the year, pun intended, where the sun is enabled for 3 days at the solstice, the sun is stabled for 3 days at the solstice. It's an allegory for the sun reckoning the year in the astronomical sign of Capricorn.
I never really thought about that. Stable meaning like fixed in place, or sturdy or strong, versus stable like a place to hold animals. But that's interesting.
There's a correlation there, is without a doubt. And so here's where I get on my soapbox, but I'll try not to. But no, bring the fire. It's just, every day I see people all over the world getting murdered by military technology. This is where we're putting our money instead of putting it back into communities and growing communities and making our nation stronger and making people prosperous and being able to have big families and just enjoying life. Instead, we're funneling everything to these corrupt freaks who are using this religious narrative to justify their immoral behavior. And they're only able to do it because there's so much of the populations on all over the world who believe in their version about it, right? And so if we want to ever stop this stuff, we're going to have to defeat the presumption not only of a historical Israel, but of a historical Gaza. And I think sometimes people see us go at the Israel thing because we cite Eusebius, the father of ecclesiastical history. Well, it's easy for us to do that because that's our own culture. Judaism and Christianity is very prominent in America and has been very prominent since its inception, even though our founding fathers were deists, the really significant ones. So when we go at that, it's like we're going after our own. It's not like we're attacking Christians or attacking Jews. But we rarely go after the other side of the equation, mainly because I think it's more appropriate for somebody on that side to do this work. But nobody wants to pick up that slack because I think a lot of people are cowards, or they're in denial, or they're religious zealots, and they won't concede it. But if you think about the martyrdom culture of the Middle East, right? Do you think you're going to convince them that those religious convictions that make them want to die for this stuff, you think you're going to be able to do that? No, it's going to have to come over time from their own side. And we've taught you that if you look at Quran, now we translate it as Quran or whatever, however you want to say it, it is from previous languages the name of the sun. If you look at the 1st century AD or what we have from that, you'll see Plutarch. The Persians called the sun or Helios Chiron or Kiru or Kyros. And
or you
it
could
looks
also
like
just
a U.
say that it's Kronos. It's KRN.
Yep. If you remove the if you move the vowels, you have Karen, which in those languages signifies radiance, but also like a seed and horn. Now, if we're in the East, right? If you're in the East, it's probably terrifying having the American Empire focusing its eye of Sauron on you, especially because the Epstein people controlling it are literally after your population, and they're after your resources. So Christianity and Judaism look like imperialism and exploitation and extermination if you're someone who lives in the East. And it's been that way for damn near a century, maybe even more, especially because of the British Empire's conquest. Now, if you're in the West, Islam looks like savagery and slavery and grape, all this crime and shit being imported into Western culture. And it's all these military age men behaving like savages, doing unspeakable acts, and the legal system intentionally letting them go and saying, oh, they're too retarded to stand trial. They're not competent, right? Or however you want to paint that, we each have the same concerns about each other because each side is not sending its best to each side. Each side is sending that psychopathic conquest side to each other's respective regions. And so ultimately, especially with the Ottoman Empire and all that stuff, it all looks like conquest to us. And so none of this is going to end until these religious situations are resolved and official, legal government level courts declare this stuff as fables and strikes them from being used or cited as pretext when creating policy. And if you think about this, the Bible, which is used as history, is the most read book in the world. The Abrahamic system used by Jews, Christians, and Muslims is the source of all conflict that we have in this paradigm. And I'm not exaggerating this. I've looked at this from every angle. So when one branch of the cult misbehaves, their misdeeds are not to be rectified absent of hypocrisy unless all branches are called out. So you can't just blame the Jews. You can't just blame Christians. You can't just blame Muslims. But when I look at online, that's all I see, rather than, it's like that. You ever seen that meme? Remember the Spider-Mans all pointing at each other?
Exactly.
That's what they are. And we're out of that system. We're not attacking you for being in that system, but we are trying our best to listen, you need to actually look at this stuff from an educated perspective of knowing how to read. Because a lot of people can't read. They'll cite these scriptures all day, but they can't look at it in its original language. So we talked about how these are like the three-headed Hydra and all that stuff. We don't need to go back into that, but I just wanted to,
Yeah. And
we're not trying to do this to just mock your religion or anything. There's real world consequences that we're trying to stop, and we can't fight, right? If I do anything of action, I'm going to get thrown in a cage, and I'm no good in a cage where I can't see the sun. It's just concrete. So this is the only recourse we have.
Yeah. And I think to add to that, why it's important to learn to read this stuff the way that we're trying to show you and teach you, to learn how to do the work for yourself, to put on the they live glasses for yourself so that you can basically dispel the hex of superstition, right? And I get that, people ask like, what is this about? Why are you doing this? And I say, I'm trying to break people out of superstition is the main reason for it. And then they're like, well, but mystical stuff happens all the time. One time, this one unexplainable thing happened to me. You're calling me a liar. And I'm like, no, in no way am I saying that things don't happen that are hard to explain, unexplainable. Extended consciousness experiences, psychic phenomenon, the incredible accuracy of astrology, which I'm going to show a little bit later at the end of the free hour. All of that is valid. What is not valid, what I'm calling superstition, is where you believe in and then repeat to others, bear false witness about events that you have zero ability to know whether or not they happened, that the contents of those narratives, like somebody dying and coming back to life, right? Neither you nor anyone you know, nor anyone with any credible witness throughout all of human history, apart from this one book, says that has ever happened at all, right? So the fact that we're basing a huge aspect of our worldview that is a lot more than just, hey, I believe this happened and that means I'm redeemed and saved and I get to go to heaven when I die despite my sins, which I think might be the most insidious part of the whole superstition. But apart from that, it also creates the pretext and justification for exactly the three-headed hydra that Dylan just described of the Abrahamic religions in this endless cycle of one is the bad guy, and the other two gang up on him, right? And that's just going to keep happening. It's just going to keep going over and over again. I mean, who knows what direction that wheel will turn next, but it's just the victim-perpetrator cycle that has been engineered on a social level collectively for damn near 1,000 years at least, going back to the Crusades, right? Going back to the inception of Islam as the next phase of the system. So we could go on and on about that, but it's really important that people take responsibility for themselves, their place in the world and the cosmos with their relationship to God or the divine, right? Rather than letting the guy in the dress tell you that if you just believe what he says and repeat what he says, then your relationship to God and the divine and your own morality or your own sin is now accounted for is bullshit. It's totally ridiculous, right? The one thing we know for certain is you were born with a sense of right and wrong. You have a moral compass. And that ought to be your proof of God above and beyond anything else that's written in some old book that you're told as a history. If we can just get back to that level where your inborn sense of right and wrong becomes your framework that you judge everything else that you're going to decide to believe or not on, then you're going to be fine. You're going to be fine. You realize that it's actually not moral to, you can believe in something you've never seen. That's fine. That's not immoral. Spreading false witness about a thing, scaring kids into thinking they're going to go to hell forever and burn in a lake of fire if they don't also believe and spread that false witness. Now you've crossed the line and you know that. You know that when you feel into yourself. You tell a child that they were born evil and wrong. They were born with sin, right? That itself is the sin. The sin is the belief and the spreading of the lie of original sin, right? Do men and women make mistakes? Is sin a thing? Could you call it karma? All of that is true. That's even mystically something you can experience. So that comes back to the realm of personal experience. You have personal experience of that. So again, no book needed, no mythical story believed as history needed to know that that's true. So I'll get off that soapbox too, but I think it's important that we just keep bringing the purpose forward of why we do this, because, a cold viewer, a new person might see it like you're attacking my religion. I'm not. Actually, we're trying to show you that your religion comes from something bigger and more true and more beautiful that describes nature and God's creation in a perfect way as soon as you step out of the dogma and the historical version.
Yes. And where we're going with all of this is even all this symbolism that this current system says is evil. If you go back far enough, you see that is what used to be the good blessing symbol, the symbol you would bless people with and the symbol you would protect yourself with to ward off evil. So it's a very fascinating subject, and I love how you drove, and you will always be encouraged to go on the soapbox to remind people we're not doing this to go at you. You're not important enough for us to focus on. That's why we don't really focus on individuals. You know?
That's a good one.
I'm just being honest.
Yeah.
Frank with them, you know, like I'm not trying to hurt anyone's feelings. You're not important enough. This system is bigger than all of us. Nature is bigger than all. We come in and we check out, but the stage stays the same. It's eternal. And maybe we'll come back. Maybe we won't. I don't know.
Well, our children pay the price of what we do or don't do.
Yes. And what we do determines the future. And that's why every single one of you within earshot of this or watching, if you're deaf, you are important. You do matter. What you're passionate about matters. The things that you're good at, that you want to invest in time to get good at and practice and work on and hone your craft, those all matter, right? Because every little thing has an impact, a very subtle impact on the whole. And as that gets corrected with right behavior, all this immoral shit slowly dies away because it's not even tolerated, right? Imagine if like one person wanted to go to war and like the entire population was like, what? And just looked at him like a crazy person. No, we got to lock you up. War? What are we going to kill people for? There's no reason to. We can solve our problems. And if not, we can just agree to let each other be. You don't need to hurt people if you don't like what they're doing. It's crazy. Anyways, you want to continue with Taylor?
Taylor wrote, as in the meditation of the third mystery of the Rosary are these words, let us contemplate how the Blessed Virgin Mary, when the time of her delivery was come, brought forth our Redeemer, Christ Jesus, at midnight, and laid him in a manger. As Justin Martyr boasts that Christ was born on the day when the sun takes its birth in the stables of Aegius, that is, in the station of the celestial goat, where the stable of Aegius is found in the sixth labor of Hercules. And Albert the Great is great in his admission. We know that the sign of the celestial virgin did come to the horizon at the moment where we have fixed the birth of our Lord Jesus Christ. All the mysteries of his divine incarnation and all the secrets of his marvelous life, from his conception to his ascension, are to be found in the constellations and are figured in the stars.
This is one of those points where we check Robert Taylor because he didn't provide a citation. So I couldn't find anywhere that Justin Martyr stated Christ was born in the stable of Aegius. So he's either taking a liberty, or maybe he's quoting the wrong. Maybe I've done this before where it's like, I think it's, I say Justin, but I meant Jerome, something like that. So
I don't know the liberty that he's taking. Maybe Justin says Christ was born on the 25th of December, right? And that would be one of the earlier people to say that. Maybe, and he's linking that to the stable, right?
But this is the power of our show notes and our shows is we go through it and we fact check and see what's there versus what isn't. You want to keep going or you want me to take over?
Well, you have here in the notes how Justin Martyr did testify that Jesus was born in a cave near Bethlehem, which was commonly used as a stable to keep animals. A cave. Man, have we heard of that before? That the sun at the 25th of December goes into a cave? Was it the cave of Brahm, maybe, in the Hindus thing?
And where is that? You know, the angel of the abyss, Apollyon,
or was it the
Abaddon,
cave on Mount Ida, where
Abram,
Zeus on Mount Ida in a cave, or Dionysus sometimes is on Mount Ida in a cave? I'm pretty sure it's a pretty common motif for the sun hiding for those 3 days whenever it's at its low point in Capricorn.
Love it. Glad you reminded everybody of that. You want to take it away, or is your voice getting tired?
I got it. Taylor continued, but the famous picture of the marine Venus, admitted to have been the finest work of art which the world has ever seen, the work of Apelles, in the execution of which that artist is said to have used his mistress Campaspe for his model, his mistress, who had been given him by Alexander the Great, came at length into the possession of the Roman Emperor Augustus, who placed it in the temple of his god. And Dylan makes a note, the painting doesn't exist in the archaeological record, the famous painting of marine Venus. There are only accounts of it remaining. Taylor continues, and thus we have the Augustan era as the supposed epoch of the origin of Christianity, when art lent its aid to superstition, and the beautiful Virgo Marina, Virgin of the Sea, became the no less beautiful Virgin Mary, the genius of the month which derives its name from Augustus. That the Virgin Mary, the planet Venus, and the Virgin of the Zodiac are absolutely the same, and consequently that Jesus Christ, the Son of the Virgin Mary, is none other than the same kind of allegorical and imaginary figment as they were, is demonstrable from the absolute identity of all the epithets and doxologies, prayers and praises ascribed to Venus in the pagan and to Mary in the Christian theology. And not alone to Venus, but to Adonis, the well-known paramour of Venus, in the mythology, are the prayers of the Christian church under that very name Adonai, which only differs from Adonis by the addition of the pronoun suffix, which makes it our Adonis, to this day addressed. The collect for the 18th of December is, O Adonai, come and redeem us with an outstretched arm. Now, I'll point out, too, this is totally speculative, right? 100% speculative. Just thinking about how he's saying that in the Augustan era, which the entire Roman history is questionable, right? I can't put a number on it, and I can't even prove it, but I strongly suspect that there's been some inserted time to the timeline, and that all this is made to look older than it is. Don't know, can't prove, working on it. I'll let you know.
At the opinion, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but real quick, like when you look at the history of Rome outside of the archaeological record, the writings are all hundreds of years after this heyday, which is very suspect to me. And I think, this is just my opinion based on my work with like Etruria and all that stuff, I think it's to cover up the real history of ancient Italy and subsequently the rest of Europe, because they don't want you knowing about it.
Yeah, I think that there's something to that. And so when Taylor's talking about how art came into the employment of the new religion, essentially, to support the new religion, we have to wonder how much of this was really constructed in the time period that we call the Renaissance, considering that huge bombshell that nobody has really ever taken into account properly, and I'm trying to reckon with it, that the Almagest, the Ptolemaic work from alleged antiquity, which contains the 88 constellations in which this astrotheology is based and is said to be the oldest point in literature or any kind of record where the constellational system that clearly the Bible is based on comes from, right? The 88 system, that is describing stars of the Renaissance era. That is not questionable. You can figure that out for yourself. He's not talking about 500 BC or, 0 AD or any of that. It's the Renaissance. So at that time period, art comes big into the picture, where there's all of this classical artwork depicting these religious scenes in the exact postures and arrangements that match the constellations that may have been invented at that time or codified at that time, and then backdated to antiquity with this text called Almagest. And if that's the case, is all a bunch of ifs at this point. But who knows? Maybe like this entire story of the marine Venus is some kind of retelling of something that was going on during the Renaissance, and they just wrote it as if this happened in antiquity too. Right? I don't know, but that's what it makes me think of.
Certainly, if somebody looks at the sources, they might agree with you, but it'd be foolish for them to ridicule you for that if you were to just look at entering things into the chronological record, because it supports what you're saying more than the other argument requires a lot of faith and a lot of belief.
Yeah, and I'm not even really making a claim there. I'm just like, that is an interesting what if that I have not ruled out and haven't proved, but I haven't ruled it out.
And you know what's interesting? I think we can't actually get to the bottom of it because we can't have an adult discussion about it yet, because every time you bring this up, mockery and ridicule occurs versus people of credibility and of academia, rather than them just looking at it and saying, okay, there's something there. We might not agree with you, but you have a point, versus, oh, you're an idiot. You don't know what you're doing. You're unprofessional. You haven't been through the same rigid structure that I have. You don't have a PhD. It gets this like weird demonic, it's kind of like, the people that don't like you questioning stuff are usually the ones whose paychecks depend on them lying, or if they're not engaged in the conspiracy themselves.
Taylor continued, the only difference between Christians and pagans being that the pagans had some sense and kept in view the sublime physical science in the words which they used. They knew, and they could tell the meaning, while Christians use even this very same words and have no meaning at all for them.
That's vertiginous burn.
Ooh. Though we read in the Old Testament the most terrible denunciations of God's wrath against those idolaters who worshipped the Queen of Heaven in Jeremiah, by whom all agree to have been meant none other than the planet Venus, or the first constellation of the zodiacal Virgin, yet have the very words, epithets, titles, attributes of this Queen of Heaven have been adopted into our Christian liturgies. Whoops. Yeah, you take it from here. I don't know which parts of this you want to bring up.
I just highlighted stuff so people could see like the feminine version of queen, which is essentially almost the same as Moloch, but Taylor, he continued, I repeat, the hymn of the pagan Lucretius and the Cyprian goddess in juxtaposition with the hymn to this day retained in the litany of the Blessed Mary. And if there be a difference, the wit of man is yet unborn that can show what the difference is. And that I included it with the source so people can see the whole thing for themselves. But what he included in his work was, O thou, from whom the Enneadi arose, source of delight, the joy of God and men, bright Venus, thy imperial sway extends over the wide seas and all the expanded fields of teeming nature. By thy power of old, the various tribes that rove the realms below issued to life and filled the vacant world. O lovely Queen of Heaven, at thy command, the whirlwinds die away, the storm is still, and the big clouds dissolved in limpid air. To thee we owe the beauties of the field and earth's rich produce. At thy mild approach, the dimpling waves put on 1,000 smiles. The sky no longer lowers, but calm and clear, spreads its pure azure to the world's extreme. And he continued, but such were the forms of pagan piety. And where's the difference? Where, I pray, the shadow of a difference, when in 10,000 Christian churches throughout all Christendom, you shall hear them in the holy office of the Virgin, to this day, thus addressing our Christian Venus. O Holy Mary, Mother of our Lord Jesus Christ, Queen of Heaven, and Lady of the world, Virgin, most miraculously fruitful, hail star of the sea, morning star. And then he cited another poem. If you want to read it, we can. If not, we can just keep going because we're about to get to New Jerusalem.
Yeah, we'll just leave that in the show notes for you, making it clear that the Virgin Mary is exactly described in the same words as Venus that to the pagans. Absolutely. I mean,
and where that comes from,
its own entire episode.
We just addressed that with Miriam, right? Waters, Maria, seas, right? Virgo, Marina. It's the Virgin of the Sea.
A couple episodes back, number 20.
Yeah. Anyhow, so now let's kick it to the gates of New Jerusalem. This graphic, I've never seen anybody make this. Have you ever seen? It was one of those things where it's one of those, I feel like we take it for granted because for me, it's kind of obvious, but I'm like, have we ever talked about this?
No, this is new stuff. Let me bring it up.
But yeah, so the 12 gates of New Jerusalem. Now, it's also important before we get into this to consider that John's revelation, which is referred to as the Apocalypse, which comes from the final stage of the Eleusinian mysteries, the Great Unveiling, was essentially fabricated, to a degree at least, by Erasmus. Bishop Herbert Marsh wrote regarding Erasmus, in his Annotations in Novum Testamentum, he gives a particular account of those Greek readings, which differ from the Latin, yet his Greek text Latinizes much more than the Complutensian. He published 5 editions of the New Testament in the years 1516, 1519, 1522, 1527, 1535, of which the 2 last were altered in many places from the Complutensian edition, especially in the Revelation of St. John. For Mill relates that of 100 alterations which Erasmus made in his edition of 1527, not less than 90 relate to the Revelation alone. It's like 90% what he's saying. And that's important because a lot of people cite Revelation as though it's the end-all be-all when it's conceded by the very priesthood that Erasmus made it up. And he's a Dutch guy.
Wow. Well, I wonder how he got it in. Like, why they decided to go with it. And that's the other thing, that when I was kind of getting on my soapbox earlier, we're talking about Revelation now, right? The thing that irks me the most about, you brought up, you don't watch content in this sort of lane like we create. What irks me the most is how people will see a piece of the puzzle, right? But they still can't get over their preconceived notions that they need to be true, or their beliefs, right? And so they'll, like, the thing that's really popular right now is the little season idea. And they're basing most of this off of the book of Revelation. They're looking at the book of Revelation and decoding it in a way that makes it sound like Jesus lived and he died and he was resurrected and then he arose to heaven and then he came back and he's already come back and ruled for 1,000 years. And that's where the missing time went. And right now we're in Satan's little season. And the majority of that is based on their interpretation of the book of Revelation. And that's nice. That's great. But we just showed you that through the words of their own priesthood, the book of Revelation is not even the same canonical work as the rest of the New Testament. It's a totally different thing. One guy basically invented it, the majority of it, or altered it so substantially as to be beyond recognition.
The story is that he was copying fragments, and instead of leaving things blank where the fragments didn't talk about them, he tried to fill them in and make them up himself. That's what the status quo priesthood will say of Erasmus. So Taylor continued, and thus we have a clear and intelligible explanation where none of your Christian teachers can give any explanation of those words of the angel of St. John in the 21st of the Revelation. Come up hither, and I will show thee the bride, the Lamb's wife. As any astronomer can say the same as well as he, come up hither, and I will show you the bride, the Lamb's wife. There she is, Mira, the daughter of Amun, the hidden one. Daughter, mother, and wife too. And there is her woolly-headed husband, him of whom the same St. John instructs us that the hair of his head was like wool, as I suppose the hair upon a lamb's head is, in general, very much like wool. And this is that point where everyone's like, we was St. John. You know what I mean? Where it's like, see, it's wool. That's literally where this goes on the online communities, right? You see them do this with Buddha And we see them do this with everything. And the reality is wool not only represents the Lamb of God, the Agnus Dei, or Agni in India, but wisdom, the Sufis. And what's even more interesting is that word in ancient Greek means sea. Wisdom, sea, all this stuff is interconnected because you're dealing with a guild which is made up of priests, astronomers, navigators, and all the merchants and everybody else. So what I did, and we don't have to go through everything, but I took the liberty of including all these passages with the lexicon, with their Greek, so you can see it for yourself. Do you want to take over and keep going for Taylor?
Where were we at? I was just scrolling through.
Oh, no worries. But where was it that the inspired apostle saw this lamb?
But where was it that the inspired apostle saw this lamb and the lamb's wife? He tells you from the top of a great and high mountain, the most convenient for making astronomical observations, and then explicitly defines them in that great heavenly city, the zodiacal band, which had 12 gates, or 12 great entrances, and names written thereon, which are the names of the 12 tribes of Israel. And those 12 names really are the names of the 12 signs of the zodiac. And the wall that surrounded the city had 12 foundations, and in them the names of 12 apostles of the Lamb, which again, not only in number but in character, answer to the 12 signs of the zodiac, of which the 6th, or harvest month, called by our Catholic brethren the Gate of the Saints' Merits, is yielded to the miraculously fruitful Virgin, which was never any other than the Virgin of the Zodiac, which is the 6th sign of the zodiac. Virgo. So I'm going to read this part. So for people that are not fully familiar with the idea we're discussing here, the 12 gates of New Jerusalem, this is, as you probably figured out, from the book of Revelation. And I'm pulling this up. We can look at it from here. Revelation chapter 21, the 12 gates of New Jerusalem, described as with 12 massive pearls, each guarded by an angel, and inscribed with the name of one of the 12 tribes of Israel. They symbolize, according to this Google search, the complete inclusion of God's people, representing divine government, eternal access to God, and the fulfillment of Old Testament promises. The key details from the Bible say the city has a high wall with 3 gates on the 4 sides, on each of the 4 sides, making them accessible from every direction. Each individual gate is made of a single massive pearl. Okay, so this is
real quick,
same detail.
Real quick.
So the New Jerusalem is supposed to be like something that comes after the apocalypse, a new city of God.
But that apocalypse is the great unveiling, which in the Eleusinian mysteries, that's when you're taught. That's the final stage of initiation, when you're taught the meaning of all the things you've been studying, all the mythology, all of that, and what they signify in the real world, the secrets encoded in them. And if you will concede that these 12 tribes correspond to the 12 zodiacal signs, then wouldn't it make sense that God's chosen people are actually the signs of the zodiac, the constellation made up of the people or the stars?
The children of Israel?
Yeah.
The children of Chronos, time?
Wouldn't then we all be able to, if you could just concede that this is astrotheology, as it obviously is, which we'll show, then can you lay down this idea that any flesh and blood race of people is not being described in these books? That's what I'm trying to get the concession of, which I can't because these people will cling to it till death, but that's what I'm trying to get the concession.
So we're at about hour and 3. Let's save the part about talking of the birthstone analogy, because that's actually pretty cool stuff. We'll get into that in the members half. But before we go away from the free side, Dylan, I wanted to show you the birth chart of this podcast, Inner World. And so we'll take a little tangent here and look at that. I have been doing some work in the archives of the show to try to revamp the presentation and packaging and all that. And I've been seeing when things got published. And so based on the day and time that the very first upload of the very first episode was published, I decided to create a natal chart, because this is something you can do with like an event or even a non-living thing, right? The moment in time that it is born into the world or made public or what have you, that has an astrological significance according to a lot of astrologers. And we're going to see just how true that really is. So I'm bringing it up and just look at how intense this chart is. It's like all this huge stellium in Pisces and in Aquarius. Now, for people that are just listening or they don't easily interpret a natal chart, let me just go through it a little bit of what I'm noticing here about it. Actually, I'll give it a pretty decent analysis. First of all, the show has, and you can jump in at any time, just interrupt. But maybe I should just ask you what you notice first, if anything's popping out at you.
Well, we've got Mars square Jupiter and Mars square Uranus. I always look at the squares. You got Venus square Uranus. The moon is square Jupiter. There's some things that some people would say are not so great. So, I don't know what to make of it, but generally what I look at is whether the sun or the moon is square or trine anything. Those are like the most important. And they don't really see, nothing really seems to be jumping out at me in that regard. But you can see that we are definitely Gemini and Pisces and Aquarius heavy, which is ironic given that so much of this revolves around that symbolism.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So we'll just start with the ascendant. That is the sign rising on the moment, the sign rising at the eastern horizon, the moment that the show was born, which was 8:20 a.m. on March 7th, 2024. So this Aries ascendant, I don't know how there could be a better ascendant, because that's like how the show appears to the world.
This is actually like my natal chart pretty much. Minus where the positions of the planets are, but like if you look at like where Leo is, all that stuff. Like if the sun were in Leo, my natal chart looks like this. Well, it's the
same house system because you have an Aries ascendant. Exactly. So right away, there's a cool sync there. I'm an Aries sun, so that's one of our main crossovers as the two hosts of this show. But the Aries ascendant is like a warrior energy pioneer, the one who's going first, going in to the places no one else will go, bravely going where no man has gone before, that type of deal. And the sun being in Pisces, let me just show you, like, I'm sure people are familiar with it, but let's just look at the logo of the show for a second here. Right? Let me make it bigger.
And Aries is that archetypal god of war in Greek, Ares, but in Latin, Aries means ram, which corresponds to Ram, high, most high, Rama. And that god of war is also Asus or Isus, which is Jesus.
Not knowing any of this stuff with the chart, this is the logo that I made for the show. You have literally a Spartan helmet, like the perfect symbol of a warrior, also the antiquity aspect of what we cover. And then there's this like purpley misty smoke that has always been kind of like a brand thing coming from Dylan's design choices, but like we've carried that through. And that is literally like a Piscean fog, right? That is especially accentuated because Neptune's in there. So it's funny because the logo literally is like a depiction of the chart itself. Now,
that is interesting,
right? The fact that the sun being in Pisces is in the 12th house, that's saying that the soul of the show is like behind the veil, right? We can see, we're conscious, the sun behind the veil. Our work is the hidden, the mystical, the unseen, not commenting from outside it, but like we are inside of it. And Aries is opening the door to it we're bringing the Piscean mystery to people essentially. And there's this 12.
I was just going to say, it also harkens back to what you were saying earlier this episode, which is, it's not to say that these mystical things don't happen. They do. You just witnessed it, right?
It's actually even bigger than that when like we break down a few other things about it.
So we're not saying this doesn't happen in reality, but we're not sitting here saying that that's the historical record. You know what I mean? That's the difference. We're acknowledging it's a cool mystical synchronicity.
Exactly. So in the 12th house of Pisces, the Sun, Mercury, Neptune, North Node, Chiron, they're all in the 12th house. That is pretty extreme, actually. Well, let me see here. Am I reading that right? The North Node, yeah. North Node is in the 12th house. Let me pull this back up so people can follow along.
Yeah, pull it back up
to charts. So the 12th house, again, unconscious, the hidden knowledge, esotericism, prisons of belief is something people talk about the 12th house having to do with, like delusion, essentially, very Neptunian. But also it's the point where these false things dissolve as the end of the wheel occurs. So this is like the collective psyche, mysticism, all that stuff is 12th house. So we have Mercury in the 12th house, which is a Piscean 12th house. Like you have all of the signs aligned with the house that they kind of relate to because Aries is the first house. So that kind of simplifies understanding this chart. It makes it a little straightforward, like your personal chart, Dylan. But Mercury being in the Pisces 12th is like our etymological detective work that is tracing words back to their mystical roots. That's literally our method. And it's like right there in the how we communicate is right there where the Mercury is hanging out in that same stellium. Neptune in Pisces in the 12th house is like maximum strength Neptune, which is basically like psychic level intuition or almost like channeling information. And the fact that so much of our work, we call it going in a gravy portal, right? Like we start to investigate a topic, either one of us, and it's like all this stuff just opens up. All these will have a flash of intuition, like, oh, this probably relates to this. And we'll go look into that thing. And it's like, it definitely relates. It's huge. Like so much of it is almost coming from somewhere else. It's like we're being led in some kind of psychic way. I feel that way all the time when I'm doing the research. You know what I mean?
I know exactly. Oh, of course. I mean, literally, it at the risk of, sounding self-righteous and self-important and self-delusion, which, very well could be, it definitely feels like the hand of God has guided so much of my work, especially when you look at my article about the Epstein people behind the paywall. I show you how basically from the time I went out to Los Angeles, I was only 22 years old. You see me getting in with the Epstein people right away, which is how this whole process for me started, is trying to figure out why are these people into all this occult shit? What's going on, And so I show people, I show you as a young man being in my 22 in the houses of senators, like all the people that you consider powerful, I've seen how they move. And what else do you know about this chart, Chance? There's one other thing that you didn't mention that is pretty fucking cool. They're all, if you just look at once the sun kicks up to around noon, every single body luminary is in daylight. So it's like our work, they say good works are done in the day, dark works at night. So it's like, it's also lends itself to that truth and serving truth in the light in front of people so they can see what we're doing, not being sneaky.
Yeah, except for the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction there in Taurus, but it's like about to come out. That's very close to this.
So like at noon, that's what I'm saying. Like the sun has literally only been up for a couple hours.
Another thing that's interesting about the 12th house here is you have Chiron and the North Node are like right together. So it's telling us the soul of the show, the North Node's mission is the soul's mission for a birth chart. The soul mission of the show is to heal through hidden knowledge being brought from the hidden into the open. Like it's literally the North Node and the Chiron are sitting on top of each other right by the ascendant too. So it's like our mission is to heal stuff. Like this is a healing mission. This is kind of incredible.
Including ourselves, right?
Yeah.
Like ourselves as much as anybody else. Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. It's pretty cool, man. Love it. You're muted.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, Saturn here, still in Pisces, but just over the cusp into the 11th house, which is talking about bringing like structure and discipline, rigor, exactly the scholarly type of work that we bring to this esoteric stuff. Then still looking at this other stellium here in Aquarius, we have, it's all kind of getting close to the midheaven as well, the high point. Moon and Pluto in Aquarius, 10th house. That's basically our career or public type of project is the 10th house. And so the mission is revolutionary transformation through taboo truths. Literally.
Well, if that ain't what we're doing, I don't know what the hell is.
It's kind of crazy, right?
Yeah.
Like the moon is right on Pluto, which is talking about like, look at it. Like we refuse to look away from the stuff other people won't touch. There's like emotional charge about this sort of transformative, taboo communication of things that are taboo. And then Mars Venus conjunct right here in the 11th house as well. I think that is our bromance coded astrologically. Like this mission is fueled by our friendship totally. And then that's all happening in the 11th house, which is the network, the global community that this audience is serving is also built into the chart. So it's like, we're all doing this together. You know, the sort of the emotional, transformational, taboo examining stuff. Like that's our collective thing with the audience. So there's even more to it as well. But I could go on and on.
All you astrologers, post them in the comments.
Yeah. I'm sure people are noticing even more stuff. Like to me, the thing that kind of blows my mind, maybe most of all, is that there was just this Saturn-Neptune conjunction back in February, which is something that only happens every 36 years, right? And for me, that's kind of relevant because that was happening at right on my sun, because I'm 36 and I was about to turn 37. It's basically happening right around the vicinity of where my natal sun is at. But that conjunction of Saturn and Neptune landed right on the show's like north node point or ascendant point, like right around there. So basically what I mean by that is like, that was about the time that the show hit a new cycle of like doing it more and kind of a new style of how we approached bringing the content. And that all happened right when this huge conjunction landed right on our ascendant north node area. It's pretty cool.
It's awesome. And it corresponds to, when I started getting Substack, because Substack was like the way for me to be more organized with show notes and then like also share them with you so you could see them, blah, blah, blah. And to my Substack subscribers, thank you. I just passed 1,200 subscribers. So thank you for every one of you who have contributed to that. Appreciate you watching, and hopefully we'll see you on the other side.
Yep. We'll see you guys on the other side. We got lots more of Dylan's notes to go through. InterversePlus.com is going to have links to all the ways you can get the show. That is a new page, a new domain. It'll link to the ways that you can support me to get it. And it has a link to Dylan's Substack in there. Just a quick and easy way. InterversePlus.com. You can choose whichever way you want to get the premium content. But thanks for being here, man. This is like genuinely amazing. Let me bring this down. Genuinely amazing to be kind of at a feeling like we're just at the beginning of a grand destiny after looking at this chart. Like, whoa, gosh, I was joking with
you. Just got to stick it out till the weather changes. You know what I mean?
I'm saying it, man. This chart is like God is on our side to do this work. This is not a random thing. There's more correspondences to how the spirit and intent and purpose of this show actually fit the chart than what I said. But the one that blows my mind is the logo piece. I didn't design a Spartan helmet inside a sun because I looked at this chart It was just what felt right, and it happened to exactly render the ascendant and the sun of this show's natal chart perfectly. Like that, this was meant to exist. There's some other forces shaping a lot of the decisions that go into this, and I think that's really, well, I don't want to say other forces. It's like, this is, I think both of you and I, we agree that we really want to just serve truth itself, which at the end of the day is the same thing as serving God.
And I think for every one of you watching, I think like when you're on your purpose and you're doing something that you're passionate about using your God-given tools, that's, God is on your side as well. And it's about what you're using it for. And I think like the more you invest in yourself of what your natural attributes are, the better you get at it, and the more benefit you are to other people around you. And it just kind of is like a nice, like in our own ways, we all kind of contribute to the rising tide that lifts all boats.
See you guys on the other side. This has got to be one of the most obvious, not disputable astrotheological things in the whole Bible.
The second is sapphire, which may signify Taurus. The third, chalcedony, which is agate, corresponding to Gemini. Fourth stone is emerald, corresponding to Cancer.
Is this a Mandela effect? I've never even noticed that this was in the book of Revelation.
They say it signifies hidden. It's a title given to the sun.
There's a whole subculture online where people call each other Anon because their identity is concealed.
What up, Amun, my Amun?
You might as well just combine them all to Jupiter so that you never miss any part of him and you're worshiping everything at once and you don't leave anything out. See, it's like very rational to do Christianity. Thank you for listening to Inner World. To unlock the second half of this episode and access the entire archive of our research, join Interverse Plus or become a supporter on Dylan's Substack. Find links to all the different ways you can support at interverseplus.com.